For my close reading, I've taken What's a Planet and Why is Pluto Not in the Planet Club Anymore from a PBS site that goes along with a movie Seen in the Dark. It doesn't directly talk about Pluto in the movie, but because that's a recent change to our solar system and what we list as a planet, they thought it was good to have that in there. All right. So first of all, I summarize the first paragraph. It gives me the idea that I have to go back to the 1700s to get the full picture of the life cycle, if you will, of Pluto. Notice that even back then, what scientists would do is they would find patterns and examine things that reinforce the pattern, or something that's odd, the spacing of planets orbiting the sun here. They thought between Mars and Jupiter there should be another planet, based on what they saw between the terrestrial planets up close to the sun and the gas giants. They thought something was missing there. So they actually formed something called a Missing Planet Bureau. I had not known that. I think that's kind of fun. Maybe we could do something with that in class. And German astronomers, that doesn't surprise me because I know a great deal of our astronomy history happened in Europe. So they were looking for a planet, but as is often the case in science, what they're looking for and what they find are two different things. So one of the first things they found was a dim object between Mars and Jupiter. It's right where they were looking for. This gentleman called it after a goddess of Sicily, but others kept looking also, especially the Missing Planet Bureau. They wanted to find what they were looking for. Sometimes in science, we get blinded by what's there, by what we're looking for. So this is a nice thing also that goes along with what we talked about Galileo at the beginning of our unit. Now they found Juno. They found Vesta. And in all, they had about 300 of these objects discovered. But they weren't really planets. They certainly weren't like Jupiter, and they weren't really like Mars either. When they started realizing the multitude of Ceres-like relatives in the same area of the solar system, they started calling them asteroids or minor planets. But as you can see, there's a table at the bottom of this that got cut off, unfortunately. This is not the first time that something has been thought to be a planet and then demoted. And so the idea is nobody's picking on Pluto. It's that Pluto is not fitting the description, and therefore we have to change what we think. We have to change our conceptions. Now, they really had a lot of these minor planets or asteroids in what we now call the asteroid belt. And there was no way they were going to ask people to learn all their names. They just were not as important as the planets. They also weren't as visible also, because remember now we've crossed over what people can observe with the naked eye into what astronomers are looking at with an aid. In 1846, Neptune, the fourth of the giant planets, was discovered. And now we have 8 planets. So people are thinking, well, gee, what's next? And of course, one of the larger things they found in the distance was this, what we called in the 1930s, Pluto. It was classified as a planet, but not a lot was known about it. And you can see, up until recently, we still haven't had very good images of it. Now, some interesting things happened. Remember how we talked about the fact that scientists see patterns, recognize patterns, and look for things that either fit those patterns or don't fit those patterns. Here are 2 more examples of that. Pluto's orbit really is more elongated than other planets. And it crosses the orbit of Neptune. And the author of this jokes, not the kind of thing you would expect a decent planet to do, but really there's no other example of that. So in 1930 we accepted Pluto as a planet, yet it had some oddities that we did not think characterized what a planet was. Now what really was the death knell of Pluto was in about 2013, they started looking at things that were almost as big as Pluto. 2003. When they found Eris, they really realized that they were looking at less than a planet in Pluto. And so by then they started to recategorize that. And in fact, in 2006, we know that they recommended that Pluto and Eris be called dwarf planets now, or minor planets. And some people got a little bit upset by that, but I think it might help to realize that Pluto hasn't always been on the same plane level as something like Saturn or Mars. For most of human history, in fact, we had 7 planets. This article has a table that's cut off that I'm showing you. And it only went out to Saturn. Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo really were only looking at Mars, Venus, Earth, Mercury, Jupiter, and Saturn. And we added Uranus in the early 1800s or late 1700s. Then they started adding on those Kuiper Belt planets, but then they started taking them off. And that's also what happened, where by the 1850s we'd peeled off all of those Kuiper Belts. We've added Neptune. We added Pluto in the 1930s. We thought about adding Eris, but then we just rolled Eris and Pluto back. And now, right now, we have 8 planets.